The road that didn't exist by the time Lyra and Norin stopped pretending the vehicle might start again. The sun had climbed high enough to turn the metal hood white with glare. Kiva Dallin was still half under the front panel, one boot sticking out from the shadow, beneath the chassis. Every few seconds came the flat click of a hand tool, followed by silence, then another click. Sarah Vinn sat on the lee side of the vehicle with the water case open between her knees. She had divided what remained into 3 marked containers, then divided those again on a slate. Lyra stood a few yards away and looked at the road, or at least where the road was supposed to be. The navigation display showed a clean gray line crossing the desert from east to west. It was labeled Route 87, certified for civilian transit, average surface risk low, next service 112 kilometers ahead. Outside the windshield, there was no road. There was only pale sand ridged by wind, broken in places by dark shelves of rock and low violet scrub. Kiva slid out from under the vehicle and sat up. "Well," Lyra asked, "the left intake mount is bent. The lower shield is packed with sand. 2 suspension sensors think they are dead, which I respect, because they are nearly correct." Sarah looked up from the water case. "Can it move?" "It can move in the same sense that I can sing opera?" "Technically, yes. You do not want to be present when it happens." Lyra looked back at the empty horizon. They had taken a new route because the old local road had disappeared from the current map 2 months earlier. The update had called the replacement faster and safer. It had also called the loose basin in front of them a maintained transit surface. Kiva followed Lyra's stare. "If you say you told me so, I am drinking your share." "I did not tell you so. You thought it loudly." Sarah closed the water case. "Save the argument until after rescue." Kiva leaned back on her hands. "That sounds optimistic." Sarah's expression did not change. "It is a medical recommendation." A glint appeared on the northern horizon. Lyra narrowed her eyes. At first she thought it was heat shimmer. Then the glint split into 3, then 5, then more. Dark shapes emerged behind it, moving in a line. Kiva got her feet so fast she nearly kicked the tool tray. "A convoy." Sarah stood more carefully. Lyra said nothing. For the first time since dawn, the map in front of her mattered less than what she could see with her own eyes. Vehículos. Real ones. The lead hauler slowed when it spotted their stranded transport. Dust rolled out around the convoy, and then thinned as engines dropped to idle. Doors opened. People stepped down. One of the first was a human man in a tan travel shirt, dark trousers, and boots that had never seen this much desert. He carried 2 water canisters and a folded shade sheet. He was not wearing the bright band of a convoy coordinator. He did not have rescue markings. He looked like what he was, a passenger who had seen 3 stranded people and moved before someone assigned him a role. He stopped a few feet from Sarah. "Water first." Sarah nodded once. "Small amounts. She needs it most." She pointed to Kiva. Kiva opened her mouth to object. Sarah looked at her. Kiva closed it again. The man handed over the first container and helped another passenger stretch the shade sheet against the side of the damaged vehicle. "My name's Eric," he said. "Lyra." "Soha." "Kiva," Kiva said after drinking. "Owner of the world's most expensive stationary object." Eric glanced at the vehicle. "It has a nice shape." "It had a nicer shape yesterday." The convoy coordinator arrived a moment later. Reuben Shaw was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a sun scarf around his neck and an expression trained by years of being responsible for other people's bad days. He asked the necessary questions. How long had they been stranded? How much water remained? Any injuries? Did their emergency beacon work? Then he asked the one Lyra had been waiting for. "What route were you on?" Kiva tilted the display toward him. Reuben studied it. His face changed. Eric noticed. "What?" Reuben turned his own wrist display outward. The same gray route crossed his map. The same certification. The same service point. Lyra stepped closer. "That's where you're going?" "According to this, yes." "There is no road." Reuben frowned. "Your suspension failed before you reached the maintained section." "No," Lyra said. "We have been on the maintained section for 40 kilometers. Eric looked from the 2 displays to the open desert. He walked a few steps away from the vehicles, crouched, and touched the sand. Then he stood again. "No tire marks." Reuben said, "Wind can erase tracks quickly." Lyra pointed toward a line of scrub 20 yards ahead. "Not that quickly. Not enough to erase compression under the roots. There's not been regular heavy traffic here." Reuben opened the route status panel. "System says verified less than 6 hours ago." Kiva gave a small laugh with no humor in it. "Verified by what? Imagination?" Reuben requested a fresh check. The system processed for 2 seconds. "Route verified." Eric looked at the words, then at the sand. "That is an impressive amount of confidence for something the desert seems unaware of." Lyra glanced at him. It was not a useful comment. It was, however, the first thing anyone had said all morning that made the situation feel briefly less absurd. Reuben did not smile. "We stay here until I know more." Lyra's attention returned to him. "How long?" "Until rescue confirms a pickup point. Your system brought you onto the same route, and leaving an assigned corridor without authorization can void our rescue coverage. Staying on a corridor that does not exist seems worse." Reuben's jaw tightened, but he did not answer defensively. "I have 29 people in this convoy. Some of them are older. 2 need regular medication. I do not move them across open desert because 3 stranded travelers tell me the map is wrong." Eric said he's not wrong. Lyra turned toward him. He raised one hand. "I didn't say the map was right. I said he's responsible for more than himself. And waiting costs water." "Yes. Then which part are you agreeing with?" Eric looked toward the convoy, where passengers were shifting supplies to make room for the 3 women. "The part where I would like one more piece of information before we gamble 29 lives." Lyra stared at him for a second. Then she nodded once. "Fina." It was not agreement, but it was honest. The convoy waited. At first, waiting felt like action. Reuben sent the emergency request again. The rescue network acknowledged it and assigned a meeting point 76 kilometers east. The trouble was that the route to that point ran along the same non-existent road. Reuben requested an alternate. The network replied that the convoy was already on the safest certified corridor. He requested human review. The estimate came back at 40 minutes. 40 minutes became an hour. The sun rose higher. The convoy shifted vehicles to make more shade. Sarah checked the passengers who had been traveling longest without climate control. She reorganized water distribution and reduced the amount given to those who had been sitting in cooled cabins. One man objected. "I paid the same transit fee as everyone else." Sarah looked at him calmly. "You also have a healthy blood pressure, and you spent the morning in air conditioning. The woman behind you did not. You may have the same water after we are all equally dehydrated." He blinked, then handed the cup back. Eric, who had been helping unload a portable shelter, looked at Sarah. "Do you practice that tone?" "No. You should teach it." Sarah almost smiled. Lyra sat in the shade with Kiva and watched the east. The rescue estimate changed again. 90 minutes. Then 2 hours. Then the meeting point shifted another 20 kilometers farther along the certified corridor. Reuben came over with Eric. Sarah showed them the water count. "If we wait until the new estimate, then leave, we lose the margin to return to the last known service point." Reuben frowned. "We are carrying reserve." "Reserve is not a magical category. It is water with a different name." Eric leaned over the slate. "How much margin do we have now? If nobody gets worse and the cooling systems remain stable, enough for 1 controlled reversal or 1 forward attempt?" "Not both." Reuben stared at the numbers. Eric did too. Lyra watched his face. He looked annoyed. Not at Sarah. At himself. "You said you wanted one more piece of information," Lyra said. Eric looked up. "I did. You have it." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yes." Reuben said, "We can still wait another 30 minutes. Eric shook his head slowly. "No, that is what I was wrong about." Reuben looked at him. Eric continued, "I treated waiting like it was not a decision. But we just spent part of our return option waiting for certainty. We did not get certainty." Reuben's expression remained hard, but thoughtful. Lyra said nothing. Eric turned to her. "If we leave the official route, where do you take us?" "Not far at first. There's old hard ground north of here. Or there was. We test it. If the surface has changed, we come back." "How far before we know?" "Less than 12 kilometers." Reuben said, "And if the surface is gone?" We turn around before dark. Reuben looked at the sky, then at the convoy. If we do this, rescue may stop predicting our position. Lyra said, it is already predicting us on a road that does not exist. Reuben exhaled through his nose. I hate sentences like that. Eric said, me too. Reuben pointed at the lead vehicle. We test 12 kilometers. We keep a fuel floor. We turn around if the ground gets worse. Lyra nodded. Eric picked up his travel bag. Reuben glanced at it. What are you doing? Going in the lead vehicle. You are a passenger. I supported leaving. Seems rude to make someone else test it for me. Reuben looked as if he wanted to argue. Then he said, keep your radio on. Eric climbed into Kiva's vehicle after she had jury-rigged enough of the steering and suspension to let it move slowly. Lyra sat beside him. Kiva took the controls. The convoy left the place where the map said there was a road. The first 10 kilometers went better than Lyra expected. They crossed a shelf of compacted soil hidden under a thin layer of sand. The vehicle stopped sinking. The convoy followed in a staggered line. The navigation system complained constantly. Return to verified route. Recalculating. Return to verified route. Eric looked at the screen. It has strong feelings. Lyra said, you listen to machines too much. I was about to say the same thing about people who insult machines. I'm not insulting it. I am questioning its upbringing. Kiva laughed. The tension in the cabin loosened by 1 degree. Lyra guided them. Between 2 low ridges where the wind had stripped the surface down to darker packed ground. For a while, everything she remembered fit. Then it didn't. She told Kiva to turn west around a shallow basin. Kiva slowed. The surface looked firm. Lyra knew the place. Or thought she did. They entered. The left wheels dropped 6 inches. Kiva stopped immediately. Behind them, Reuben halted the convoy. Lyra stared at the sand. This was hardpan. Kiva said, it is not hardpan today. Eric got out. He did not say, I told you so. That irritated Lyra more than if he had. He walked the edge of the depression, then came back. The ridge to the north is higher than on your memory map? Yes. Wind shift, probably seasonal, stronger than usual. He nodded. What do we need to check next time before we trust a remembered surface? Lyra looked at him. You are not going to say it. Say what? That I was wrong. You were wrong. She stared. He shrugged. You asked. Kiva snorted. Eric crouched near the wheel. I was also wrong this morning. Apparently the desert is making a list. Lyra looked down at the sand and, despite herself, smiled. They backed the lead vehicle out with help from the second hauler. The maneuver cost fuel in nearly an hour. No one was hurt. Nothing dramatic broke. But something important changed. Lyra stopped treating memory as proof. Eric stopped treating official data as the standard all other knowledge had to defeat. At the next fork of exposed rock, they checked 3 things before turning. Lyra read the wind-scoured edge. Kiva looked for old load marks in the packed surface. Eric compared both with the direction they needed and the amount of fuel Reuben had left in reserve. It was slower. It was also better. By late afternoon, Kiva spotted something half buried in the lee of a rock shelf. She braked. What? She pointed. 2 parallel depressions crossed the packed ground. Too wide for their vehicles. Too deep for light transport. Heavy wheels, Kiva said. Recent. Lyra knelt beside one groove. The edge had not yet softened. How recent? Kiva touched the sand. Today. Maybe yesterday. Eric looked at his map. The area was marked and used. No. Industrial route. Not on the civilian layer, Kiva said. They follow the marks. An hour later, a dark vehicle appeared on the horizon. It was a water tanker, not a small service unit. A long industrial carrier with reinforced wheels and a silver heat shield over its tank. The tanker crossed their path less than 2 kilometers ahead. Its navigation beacon appeared on Reuben's commercial scanner for 12 seconds, then vanished from the civilian display. Reuben called from his second vehicle. Can we flag it? Kiva shook her head. Wrong channel. Industrial priority. The tanker never slowed, but left a deep, unmistakable track across the sand. A real route. A route the map did not show. Eric stared after it. Lyra said, "You were asking why our map was wrong." He looked at her. She nodded toward the tanker tracks. Maybe the better question is why theirs is not. They followed the industrial marks until dusk. That night, the convoy formed a crescent against a low ridge. Sarah checked the older passengers and ordered one cabin's cooling unit left running despite Reuben's concern about power. "That woman has a cardiac condition," she said. "If you want to save energy, turn off my cabin." Reuben did. Sarah slept outside. Eric found Lyra sitting on a storage crate under the stars. Talora's 2 moons were low and dull red through dust haze. He handed her a cup. She sniffed it. "Water. I considered something more exciting, but the bar is disappointing." She drank. For a while they said nothing. Then Eric asked, "How long have you lived near this desert?" "Most of my life." "And the routes change often?" "The surface changes. The routes usually adapt around it." "Usually?" Before the navigation companies became more centralized, local transport groups updated each other. Then the larger systems got better. People stopped carrying separate maps. Better at what? Most things. He smiled. That answer sounds expensive. It was convenient. She looked toward the convoy. When one old road disappeared from the system, nobody thought much of it. There was always another route. Then another road disappeared. How many? I do not know. That bothers you. It bothers me that I do not know. Eric nodded. He understood that feeling. The next morning, the tanker tracks led them between 2 black ridges. The civilian map tried 3 times to send them south. They ignored it. Midday heat rose. The radio weakened. But the navigation system continued to update. Eric was in Reuben's vehicle when another reroute appeared. Interesting. Reuben glanced at him. "What now?" "We cannot get a clean voice channel to rescue, but the map still knows us well enough to tell us where to turn. Navigation can use delayed positioning." "Delayed by how much?" Reuben opened the status page. "Less than 30 seconds. Eric looked at the weak signal icon. "So somebody's system knows where we are. We just cannot talk back to it properly." Reuben said, "That does not prove intent." "I know." Reuben gave him a sideways look. "You enjoy saying that. I enjoy remembering it." They stopped briefly near an old maintenance marker. Kiva brushed sand from the base. The symbol under the dust was not used on current civilian maps. "Service load corridor," she said. Lyra came over. "I remember these. From when I was young. Smaller settlements used to mark emergency connections with the same pattern." Reuben checked the map. No corridor listed. Lyra looked toward the west. "Sable Basin is beyond those hills." Kiva frowned. "I thought Sable Basin was just a dry catchment." "So did I." Eric studied the maintenance marker. "Could the tanker be going there?" "Yes," Kiva said. "Then we follow the road that exists." Reuben did not answer immediately. A message flashed on his display. "Return to authorized rescue corridor." He read it twice. Then looked back at the line of vehicles, at the passengers under shade sheets, at the tanker tracks crossing the ground. He shut off route guidance. Lyra watched him. Reuben said, "I am recording that this is my decision." Eric said, "Good." Reuben raised an eyebrow. "Not because I disagree. Because if someone reviews this later, they should not pretend the passengers forced you." Reuben's expression softened by half a degree. "Get back in your vehicle, Barlow." By late afternoon, they climbed a long slope of dark gravel. At the top, every conversation stopped. Sable Basin spread below them. There was water, not a mirage, not a blue line on a screen. Water. Several long reservoirs sat behind pale, retaining walls. Pump towers rose between them. Silver pipes crossed the valley floor. Tankers moved along graded roads. Cooling stacks released thin white vapor into the dry air. Since the convoy found Lyra, Sarah, and Kiva, they had measured drinking water by cup. Below them, machines were moving it by the ton. Kiva whispered, "That is not a service point." Lyra said no. Sarah stood beside them with one hand shading her eyes. Reuben did not speak. Eric looked at the map. Sable Basin was labeled restricted industrial terrain. No civilian road entered it. He looked down at the real roads, then at the reservoirs. He felt no triumph, only a strange, cold clarity. The map had not failed to notice the place. It had noticed it very carefully. The descent into Sable Basin took another 2 hours. The water station was not guarded like a fortress. There were gates, scanners, and clear traffic lanes, but no armed line waiting to repel desperate civilians. Workers in light gray uniforms came out when the convoy stopped. Alina Korin arrived last. She was tall, silver-haired, and moving quickly enough to show urgency without panic. She took in the vehicles, the damaged transport, Sarah's medical satchel, and Ruben's convoy tag. Who was responsible for the group? Ruben stepped forward. I am. Alina nodded. How many people? 32 now. Critical injuries? No, Sarah said. 3 moderate dehydration cases. 2 passengers with conditions that become dangerous if our cooling reserve fails. We have water, but not enough to wait through the current rescue estimate. Alina looked at her. You are medical? Community care. Come with me. They disappeared into the station office. Eric remained outside with Lyra and Kiva. He expected water to come immediately. Instead, workers brought shade, cooling packs, and sealed emergency cups. Not enough to refill the convoy. Enough to stabilize everyone. Ruben emerged from the office 20 minutes later, looking angrier than Eric had seen him. They cannot. Fill our tanks. Kiva stared. We are surrounded by tanks. Different system. Water has systems now. Eric said, everything get a system if you wait long enough. Lyra ignored him. Why not? Alina stepped out behind Ruben. Because the industrial reservoirs are not connected to certified civilian dispensing. Some lines carry partially treated water. Others contain additives for cooling systems. If I open the wrong connection, I can contaminate both sides. Kiva pointed at the visible reservoirs. All of it. No. Then give us the part that is water. Alina's face tightened, but not from offense. I'm trying. She showed them the emergency request on her tablet. The system had accepted the convoy's condition and assigned an external rescue delivery. Arrival estimate, 9 hours. Ruben said, the storm reaches us in 4. As if summoned by the word, wind lifted a sheet of sand off the ridge. Alina looked west. The sky had taken on a copper color. Sarah came out. They cannot travel after that front arrives. Alina said, I know, and we cannot wait 9 hours. I know. Sarah held her gaze. Then what can the station do that the system does not want to do? For the first time, Alina looked uncomfortable. Not guilty. Uncomfortable. There may be an old civil emergency line. Lyra turned. Where? Alina pointed beyond the station, toward a low cut in the terrain. It predates the current distribution network. When the basin was first developed, there were emergency draw points outside the industrial perimeter. Kiva said, the system was retired from routine use. Retired or removed? Alina hesitated. Retired. Eric looked at Lyra. She was staring toward the low cut. There used to be a road there. Alina looked at her sharply. You know it. I know where one should be. The wind strengthened. Sand rattled against the station wall. Alina led them inside. The old emergency line still existed. That was the good news. The bad news was that the civilian draw point lay several kilometers outside the current station perimeter, beyond a section of terrain no longer maintained by industrial crews. The old access road had vanished from the navigation. Later years ago, Alina checked pressure history, isolation status, and treatment compatibility. Eric watched her work from across the room and understood almost none of it. That was fine. He did not need to. After 20 minutes, Alina looked up. The line can probably deliver a limited flow. Probably, Ruben asked. It has not supplied a civilian point in 11 years. What do you need? I need access to the exterior terminal. Someone has to verify the mechanical condition. If it is intact, I can control the station side. Ruben checked the store map. No time. Lyra said, there is a route. Eric looked at her. She pointed to a topographic image. Old road here. It follows the lower rock shelf. The navigation system showed nothing. Alina said, that route was removed before I took this position. Removed from the map, Lyra said. Not necessarily from the ground. The wind hit the building hard enough to hum through the window frames. Ruben shook his head. We are not sending people into that. Eric looked at the map, then at the storm, then at Lyra. How certain are you? She gave him a tired look. You really want a number? Not anymore. That surprised both of them. She leaned over the topographic image. The first half, very. The second half, less. The land has shifted. Reuben said, then no. Eric turned to him. If we do nothing, we shelter. And the water? We use what we have. Sarah stood near the door. If we shelter through the storm on current supply, 2 passengers will have no safe margin if cooling power drops. Reuben closed his eyes for 1 second. Eric knew exactly what he was feeling. The desire for one more piece of certainty. One more confirmation. One more reason to delay being responsible for the wrong choice. Eric looked at Lyra. I'll go. Reuben said no. Eric faced him. I supported leaving the official corridor. I supported coming here. If I think this is the next step, I'm not sending her alone. Lyra said, I did not ask you to come. I know. Then why are you? Because I'm learning that my opinions are expensive. For the first time all day, Lyra laughed. It was short but real. Kiva pushed away from the wall. I am coming too. Sarah said no. Kiva looked at her. Sarah pointed to the convoy. You are the only person who knows how to get 3 of these vehicles to carry equipment without overloading their heat systems. Stay. Kiva opened her mouth, then nodded. Fine. Alina handed Lyra a rugged field tablet. I can give you the old maintenance contour. It is not a roadmap. Do not treat it like one. Eric said, we have some experience with that. Alina almost smiled. They left in the lightest functioning utility vehicle before the storm swallowed the basin. Lyra drove. Eric sat beside her with the field tablet secured against his leg. At first, the old route was obvious. 2 eroded marker posts stood between rock shelves. The ground under the sand was firm. Behind them, the station shrank into a pale block against copper air. Then the wind intensified. Visibility dropped. The second marker disappeared behind blowing sand. Lyra slowed. This is where the old route curved. Left or right? Left. They turned. For 20 minutes, the ground stayed stable. Then the shelf split. One path descended toward a shallow wash. The other climbed along exposed rock. Lyra stopped. Eric looked at her. You don't know. I know what it used to be, which is not the same thing. No. She got out. Eric followed. The wind pushed hard enough to make walking awkward. They checked the low route first. The wash was smooth. Too smooth. No exposed marquer base. No compact shoulder. The high route had a line of darker stone breaking through the sand. Lyra crouched. Could be the old retaining edge. Eric looked at the field tablet. The maintenance contour ran between them, uselessly broad. He remembered their earlier mistake in the basin. Where would the wind strip old road instead of burying it? Lyra pointed toward the higher side. Here. Would service vehicles take the wash? Not after heavy seasonal runoff. Any runoff recently? 2 weeks ago. They both looked at the high route. Lyra said, I would take it. Eric watched the storm. The rational part of him wanted another test. He could almost feel the old habit reaching for time. But time was not free. He nodded. Then we take it. Lyra started back toward the vehicle. Eric said, wait. She turned. If this is wrong, it is our mistake. Not yours. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. They drove high. 5 minutes later, Lyra spotted the broken top of a marker post. 10 minutes after that, they found the exterior terminal half buried under sand. It was a squat metal cabinet beside a concrete basin large enough for service vehicles to fill portable tanks. The cabinet still carried an old civil emergency symbol. Eric stared at it. So this has been here the whole time. Lyra brushed sand off the panel. Apparently the desert kept a better archive. They contacted Alina. Her voice came through in bursts. Do not open anything yet. I need the terminal status. Lyra read the indicator lights. Eric cleared sand from the lower access area. The work was slow and unglamorous. The cabinet held no hidden mechanism or code, only old equipment stiff from years without use. Kiva arrived 20 minutes later in a heavier utility hauler. She had finished staging the first shelter loads with Reuben, then brought the equipment the exterior terminal needed. She brought 2 station workers and portable storage bladders. Miss me? Lyra said no. Good. I would have been disappointed. At the station, Alina tested the line from her side. The first command failed. Her voice came over the radio. The terminal is still classified inactive. The central system is refusing a civilian destination. Kiva looked at Eric. Can you argue with it? Not my department. Alina continued. There is an emergency override, but it triggers a mandatory operations review. Eric looked at the dead terminal. The storm roared around them. That sounds less important than water. It is not the review I am worried about. What are you worried about? A pause. If the line has degraded internally, I could damage the branch and lose the option entirely. That was different. Eric said, can you test it safely? At very low flow. Eric looked at the dead terminal, then at the storm around them. If that is a safe test, it sounds better than waiting for an option that is not coming. Alina was quiet. Eric, you do not run this system. No. Good. He almost laughed. She continued. If I initiate emergency mode, the technical decision is mine. Eric looked at Lyra, at Kiva, and at the old basin. Then make the decision you can defend. Silence. Then Alina said, stand clear the outlet. A low vibration traveled through the buried line. Nothing happened. Kiva leaned toward the outlet. Sarah's voice came over another channel from the station. Kiva, if you put your face over that pipe, I will personally dehydrate you. Kiva stepped back. She ruins everything. A cough came from inside the terminal. Then a thin stream of cloudy water spilled into the basin. Kiva's smile disappeared. Not clear. Alina said, expected. Flushing old line. Do not collect. The stream ran for 30 seconds. Then a minute. It gradually cleared. Alina reduced flow. Sample it. One station worker filled a sealed vial and used a field tester. They waited. Eric found himself holding his breath. The worker looked up. Within emergency potable limits. No one cheered. Not yet. They connected the first storage bladder. Alina increased flow carefully. Water began to move. At first it was only a steady, controlled stream, running through a line built years ago to do exactly this. Eric stared at it and felt something inside him settle. The answer had not been hidden because it was impossible. It had been hidden because the system had stopped showing people where to look. Back at the convoy, Sarah rationed the first delivery to those who needed it most. Ruben moved 3 vehicles into a tighter windbreak despite the insurer's routing guidance. Kiva made 2 trips through worsening visibility. Lyra stayed at the exterior point to help guide each run. Eric did whatever needed doing. He carried filled containers. He marked the safe approach with reflective tabs. He listened when Alina told them to stop flow for a pressure check. He did not pretend to understand the system. He did not need to. By nightfall, the convoy had enough water to shelter through the storm. The wind struck Sable Basin for hours. Inside the station's emergency shelter, people slept in coats and travel blankets between crates and folding cots. Eric sat against a wall with a cup in his hands. Lyra sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said, "You chose the high route quickly." "No, I chose it after spending most of the trip learning that I do not get extra points for being late." "You were still uncertain." "Yes." "Did you hate that?" "Deeply." She smiled. "So you have not changed completely." "I'm trying to preserve some personality." She leaned her head back against the wall. "You know what I hated?" "What?" "Being wrong about the basin." Eric looked at her. "The soft ground. I have lived around this desert most of my life. I was used to other people trusting me. And now I think trust should survive being wrong." Eric took a drink. "That sounds inconveniently mature. Do not spread it around." He smiled. Outside, the wind continued. Inside, the old emergency line kept filling storage one controlled batch at a time. By morning, the sky was clear. The world outside had changed shape. Sand covered half the access road. Some marker posts were gone, but the convoy was intact. So was the water line. The rescue team finally arrived shortly after noon. They came from east along an industrial service road that had never appeared on Ruben's civilian map. Ruben stood in front of the first rescue vehicle with his arms folded. The driver stepped down. "Sorry for the delay. Routing conflict." Ruben looked at the road behind him, then at Eric. Eric said, "Do not." Ruben's mouth twitched. The convoy left Sable Basin the following day. Eric expected the departure to feel larger than it did. Instead, people loaded bags, checked water seals, complained about sand in places sand had no business reaching, and climbed back into their vehicles. Alina stood beside Reuben while the station copied the convoy logs and the emergency line record into separate review channels. No one had a single file that explained the whole story. That turned out to matter. Reuben's navigation history showed roads marked as verified across ground that had never carried regular traffic. The convoy position records showed repeated attempts to push them away from the industrial corridor. Rescue dispatch had kept moving their meeting point farther along routes they could not safely use. Sable Basin's own systems showed a functioning civil emergency line that public guidance no longer displayed. Alina added only what she personally knew. The line had been available. The convoy had met the conditions for emergency use. The current system had still refused the civilian destination until she used an older emergency authority. She did not call anyone corrupt. She did not need to. The facts were uncomfortable enough on their own. Eric left before the first formal review began. He still had somewhere else to be. Haven Ridge appeared 6 days later than he had planned, a scatter of white roofs and narrow wind towers along a shallow valley. Nothing about it looked like a place waiting for a hero. Eric was relieved. At the transit office, 3 messages from his new employer were waiting. The first asked whether he had been delayed. The second asked whether he was still coming. The third said his first scheduled shift had been given to someone else, but the position would remain open until the end of the week. Eric arrived with 1 day left. His supervisor read the transit report twice. You left the certified corridor. Yes. You lost coverage. Temporarily. You understand that was a bad idea. Parts of it were. The supervisor looked at him for another moment. Can you start tomorrow? Eric smiled. Yes. The job was ordinary. He installed interior panels, repaired household fixtures, replaced weather seals, and finished living spaces in a district still being expanded. Most days, the worst problem in front of him was a warped door frame or a shipment that arrived in the wrong size. He liked that. The desert did not disappear from his life, though. A week after he started work, Reuben sent him a copy of the first review notice with one sentence highlighted. Civilian routing data around Sable Basin had been generated from incomplete access layers. Eric read it twice. It was careful language for a simple fact. The public map had been trying to route people around roads it was not allowed to show. 2 weeks later, Lyra sent him a photograph of an old local route marker being pulled out of storage. No comment, she wrote. Eric answered, I am waiting for the map to apologize. Her reply came almost immediately. You may die of old age. Kiva repaired her vehicle. She sent a picture of herself leaning against it with both arms folded. Still expensive. No longer stationary. Sarah was quieter. For several weeks, Eric heard nothing from her. Then one evening a message arrived. Reuben now carries 12% more water than required. I have created a monster. Eric replied, that is how policy improvement looks. Sera ensuite? No. It looks like paperwork. Lyra's messages came more often than the others. At first they were mostly about the review. Then, without either of them deciding when it happened, they stopped needing Sable Basin as a reason to talk. She sent him photographs of storms moving over the western ridges. He sent her pictures of crooked wall panels and badly fitted cabinets. She criticized the straight lines in his work. He criticized the missing lines on her maps. The official findings arrived in pieces over the next few months, but Eric stopped reading every page. He understood enough. Vantage Utilities had not designed the routing system to strand travelers. The review found something less dramatic and, in its own way, more troubling. Restrictions that had once served operational purposes had remained in place long after those purposes had narrowed. Public navigation software was forced to predict routes around infrastructure it could not display. Some of those predictions have been labeled as verified roads. Rescue planning inherited the same blind spots. The water issue was not simple either. Talora was still dry. Sable Basin was not an endless reserve, and industrial demand could not simply be switched off. But the basin's production capacity had been greater than civilian planning models showed, and communities had been making decisions with incomplete information. The changes came slowly. Emergency drop points returned to public guidance. Restricted roads were finally marked as restricted roads instead of being replaced by imaginary civilian routes. Local transport groups regained a direct way to submit. Ground corrections. Vantage Utilities lost exclusive control over some distribution decisions, and production reporting became visible to more than one authority. Nothing became perfect. Sable Basin remained industrial. Water still had to be pumped, treated, stored, and moved. But the system could no longer hide the same thing in the same way. 5 months after the storm, Eric had a free day and a reason to travel east. Lyra met him at Haven Ridge before sunrise. She climbed into the passenger seat, carrying one small bag. Eric looked at it. That all. We are going for one day. I have learned not to trust travel estimates. You have learned fear. I prefer experience. They drove out under a pale morning sky. The road toward Sable Basin was busier than Eric remembered. At the first major junction, the navigation display updated. He glanced down. A route appeared across the screen. Sable Basin Civil Corridor. Below it, a separate line marked Industrial Restricted Access. A rescue point was shown near the edge of the valley. The old local name of the basin appeared beneath the official label. Eric slowed. Lyra looked at him. What? He pointed at the screen. She followed his finger. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Eric looked through the windshield. Ahead of them, the road was there. Not a prediction. Not a line calculated across open sand. A real road. Its surface was compacted dark soil reinforced at the edges. Marker posts stood at regular intervals. Tire tracks ran toward the horizon. A water rescue symbol appeared on a sign near the junction. Eric looked from the road to the screen, then back again. Lyra folded her arms. Do you need to verify it? Eric studied the road one more time. I was just wondering whether Talora finally hired someone to teach the map geography. Lyra turned toward him. Maybe it learned from being wrong. Eric smiled. That sounds inconveniently mature. She laughed. He eased the vehicle forward. The line on the screen curved gently east. Outside the windshield, the road curved with it. For the first time since he had crossed that desert, the map and the world agreed. Eric kept driving. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have trusted first, the official route, local experience, or the evidence outside the windshield? If you'd like more original science fiction mysteries, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel.